The massive crystal dome of the Nexus station gleamed against the backdrop of three dying stars, their crimson light casting eerie shadows across the diplomatic quarter. Ambassador Sarah Chun straightened her uniform one last time before entering the Grand Assembly Hall, where representatives from 47 different species had gathered for what many hoped would be the end of the longest war in galactic history. The war had raged for nearly 3 centuries, consuming entire star systems and reducing once thriving worlds to radioactive wastelands. Humanity had joined the conflict reluctantly, dragged in when the hegemony, a coalition of the galaxy's oldest and most powerful species, had demanded Earth's submission to their authority. What started as a simple territorial dispute had escalated into a nightmare of unprecedented scale. Sarah's heels clicked against the polished floor as she made her way to the human delegation's seats. Around her, the hall buzzed with alien conversations conducted in dozens of languages, translated by sophisticated neural implants. The Zephyrians, with their flowing tentacle-like appendages, whispered among themselves in ultrasonic frequencies. The crystalline void shapers projected their thoughts directly into the air as shimmering geometric patterns. Even the brutish Chronax, standing nearly 3 meters tall with their chitinous armor plating, seemed subdued by the gravity of the occasion. At the center of the hall stood the Arbiters, an ancient race that had volunteered to mediate the peace talks. Their elongated forms seemed to phase in and out of reality, as if they existed partially in another dimension. Elder Arbitrator Keth Vash had spent months preparing these negotiations, promising that today would bring an end to the bloodshed. "The session will now commence," Keth Vash announced, his voice resonating through the hall without any visible mouth or vocal apparatus. "We gather here not as enemies, but as fellow children of the cosmos, seeking to heal the wounds that have scarred our galaxy." Sarah felt a familiar knot form in her stomach. She had been part of diplomatic corps for over 2 decades, but something felt wrong about these talks from the very beginning. The other species had been too eager to negotiate, too quick to offer what seemed like reasonable terms. Humanity's intelligence networks had picked up concerning chatter in the weeks leading up to the conference, but nothing concrete enough to act upon. The first few hours proceeded as expected. Each faction presented their grievances, their losses, their demands for reparations. The hegemony spoke of maintaining order and stability in their ancient territories. The Free Alliance argued for independence and self-determination. Smaller species voiced their fears of being absorbed or eliminated by the larger powers. When it came time for the human delegation to speak, Sarah rose slowly from her seat. The hall fell silent, thousands of eyes and optical sensors turning toward her. Humanity was still considered young by galactic standards, but their rapid technological advancement and fierce independence had earned them grudging respect among some species and bitter hatred among others. "Honored delegates," Sarah began, her voice carrying clearly through the hall's acoustics. "Humanity did not seek this war. We were content to explore our small corner of the galaxy, to learn and grow as a species. But when forced to choose between freedom and subjugation, we chose to fight. We have lost billions of our people, seen entire colonies reduced to ash, watched our children grow up knowing only the sound of air raid sirens." She paused, looking directly at the hegemony delegation. "But we have also learned something important during these dark centuries. We have learned that freedom is not something that can be negotiated away, traded for temporary peace, or surrendered in the hope of mercy. It must be defended, always and without compromise." A murmur rippled through the assembly. Some delegates nodded in understanding, while others shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The hegemony's lead representative, a towering domina named Thresh-Cole, remained motionless, his 4 eyes fixed on Sarah with undisguised contempt. The negotiations continued for 3 more days. Maps were studied, borders were drawn and redrawn, compensation packages were calculated and recalculated. Sarah found herself cautiously optimistic as the talks progressed. Perhaps, after all the death and destruction, they really could find a path to peace. It was on the 4th morning that everything changed. Sarah was reviewing the latest draft of the proposed treaty in her quarters when her secure communicator chimed. The message was brief but devastating. Perimeter Fleet reports massive hegemony buildup in sectors 7 through 12. Estimated 40,000 ships. Signal analysis indicates preparation for coordinated strike. Recommend immediate evacuation of diplomatic team. Her blood ran cold. The hegemony had been negotiating in bad faith, using the peace talks as cover to position their forces for a decisive blow against humanity. While diplomats talked of peace in the crystal halls of Nexus Station, generals were preparing for the largest military offensive in galactic history. Sarah's mind raced. She had to warn the other delegations, had to expose the hegemony's treachery before it was too late. But, as she reached for her communicator again, her door chimed. Through the transparent aluminum panel, she could see 3 figures in the distinctive armor of hegemony security forces. Ambassador Chun, came a voice through the door's communication system. By order of the hegemony high command, you are under arrest for conspiracy against galactic peace. Sarah stepped back from the door, her heart pounding. The peace talks hadn't just collapsed. They had been a trap from the very beginning. The hegemony had never intended to honor any agreement. They had used the negotiations to gather intelligence, to position their forces, and to eliminate the human leadership all at once. The door began to glow as cutting torches were applied from the outside. Sarah grabbed her emergency beacon and activated the quantum encryption sequence. With any luck, her message would reach Admiral Harrison and the human fleet before it was too late. As the door burst open and armed figures poured into her quarters, Sarah's last thought before the stun blast hit her was of Earth, of the blue skies and green fields she might never see again. The peace talks had indeed collapsed, but, in their failure, something far more dangerous had been born. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when humanity's patience finally ran out. The message that reached Admiral Harrison 3 hours later contained only 7 words, but they would echo through history. Peace talks failed. Humanity is now unleashed. In the depths of space, beyond the reach of the Nexus Station sensors, the human fleet began to move. They had hoped for peace, had genuinely tried to find a diplomatic solution to the galaxy's problems. But if the other species insisted on war, then humanity would give them a war unlike anything they had ever imagined. The stars themselves would burn before humanity bowed to tyranny. Admiral Marcus Harrison stood on the bridge of the UHS Defiant, watching the tactical display with grim satisfaction. The holographic representation showed the disposition of human forces across a dozen star systems, each fleet positioned with surgical precision. For 3 centuries, humanity had fought defensively, reacting to hegemony aggression, protecting their colonies and trade routes. Today, that would change forever. Signal from the Prometheus, sir, reported Lieutenant Commander Torres, her fingers dancing across the communication console. Admiral Williams confirms the 7th Fleet is in position. All ships report ready for Operation Starfall. Harrison nodded, his weathered face betraying no emotion. At 68, he had spent more of his life at war than at peace. He had seen the glassed remains of New Geneva, had pulled survivors from the wreckage of the Canterbury Station, had held dying soldiers in his arms on the blasted surface of Kepler 442b. The memory of each loss was etched into his soul, fuel for the fire that would soon consume the galaxy. Admiral, came another voice from the communication station. We're receiving priority transmission from Nexus Station. It's Ambassador Chin's emergency beacon. Harrison's jaw tightened. Sarah Chun had been his daughter's roommate at the Naval Academy, had been at his family's table for countless dinners. She was more than a diplomat to him. She was family. Put it through. The message was brief, but devastating. The peace talks had been a sham from the beginning. The hegemony had used the negotiations to position their forces for a coordinated strike against human space. Even now, their massive fleets were moving toward Earth and the core human systems. How long until the hegemony forces reach our borders? Harrison asked his tactical officer. 36 hours at maximum burn, sir. They've been positioning ships for weeks under the guise of providing security for the peace talks. Harrison turned to face the bridge crew. These men and women had served with him for years, had fought beside him in the dark days of the Rigel campaign and the hell of Vega Prime. They deserved to know what they were about to unleash. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, his voice carrying the weight of 3 centuries of human suffering. The hegemony believes they have cornered us. They think that by taking our diplomats hostage and positioning their fleets for a surprise attack, they can finally crush human resistance once and for all. He paused, looking at each face in turn. They are about to discover how wrong they are. The bridge fell silent except for the steady hum of the ship's systems. Harrison walked to the tactical display and began highlighting targets across the galaxy. The hegemony's strength lies in their industrial capacity. They can replace ships faster than we can destroy them in conventional warfare. But they have made a critical error. They have concentrated their forces for this offensive, leaving their core systems vulnerable. His finger traced routes through the galactic map, showing the human fleet's planned movements. While they strike at our borders, we will strike at their heart. The Domina's throne world of Kethmar. The Kronax foundry worlds in the spiral arm. The Zephyrian command nexuses in the outer rim. We will hit them simultaneously, using the new quantum jump drives to appear in their most protected systems without warning. Lieutenant Commander Torres looked up from her console, her face pale. Sir, those targets are heavily populated civilian worlds. The casualty count could reach the trillions. Harrison's expression didn't change. Commander, in the past month alone, the hegemony has destroyed 14 human colonies. Over 200 million civilians died in the Tau Ceti massacre. They showed no mercy to our children, our elderly, our non-combatants. They have chosen to wage total war against humanity. He turned back to the tactical display, highlighting additional targets. We offered them peace. We extended our hand in friendship despite centuries of aggression. They spat in our faces and prepared to deliver what they hoped would be the killing blow to our species. The bridge crew exchanged glances. They had all seen the intelligence reports, had all lost friends and family to hegemony brutality. The rules of warfare had been written by species that valued honor and restraint. But humanity had learned a harsh truth over the past 3 centuries. Honor was a luxury they could no longer afford. Sir, called out the ship's weapons officer. The new kinetic bombardment systems are armed and ready. Targeting solutions are locked for the primary objectives. Harrison nodded. The kinetic bombardment systems were humanity's latest innovation in warfare. Massive tungsten rods accelerated to near-light speed using gravitational slingshots and exotic matter manipulation. Each rod carried the destructive force of a nuclear weapon, but left no radiation, no fallout, just complete and utter devastation. Begin Phase 1, Harrison commanded. Across the galaxy, human fleets that had been hiding in the dark spaces between stars suddenly erupted into action. Ships that had been thought destroyed in previous battles revealed themselves to be very much alive, their crews having spent months or even years in the cold depths of space, waiting for this moment. The first targets were the hegemony's communication networks. Quantum relay stations that had taken decades to construct were vaporized in minutes by precisely targeted kinetic strikes. Command centers responsible for coordinating the massive hegemony offensive found themselves cut off from their fleets, unable to issue orders or receive status reports. On Kethmar, the throne world of the Domina Empire, Grand Admiral Threshold was enjoying what he believed would be his final victory celebration when the first kinetic rod struck the planet's surface. The resulting explosion was visible from orbit, a pillar of fire and debris that reached into the upper atmosphere. Within seconds, 12 more rods followed, each one precisely targeted at military installations and government centers. The planet's defensive grid, considered impregnable by hegemony strategists, crumbled under the sheer kinetic force of the human assault. Orbital platforms that had protected Kethmar for thousands of years were reduced to expanding clouds of superheated gas and twisted metal. Similar scenes played out across dozens of star systems. The Kronax foundry worlds, massive industrial complexes that churned out warships by the thousands, found themselves under bombardment by human stealth fleets that had been hiding in their outer asteroid belts for months. Entire production lines were wiped out in minutes, taking with them the hegemony's ability to replace their losses. The Zephyrian command nexuses, biological supercomputers that coordinated hegemony fleet movements across vast distances, were targeted by specially designed viral weapons that corrupted their organic neural networks. Without these coordination centers, the scattered hegemony fleets found themselves operating blind, unable to communicate with each other or respond to the human offensive. But the most devastating blow came when the human fleets revealed their new quantum jump capability. Ships that had been light years away suddenly appeared in the heart of heavily defended systems, bypassing defense grids and orbital fortifications to strike directly at their targets. The hegemony had spent centuries building their empire on the assumption that their technological superiority and vast resources would always give them the advantage. They had never considered that humanity might develop weapons and tactics specifically designed to negate those advantages. As reports poured in from across the galaxy, it became clear that the human offensive was succeeding beyond even the most optimistic projections. Entire star systems that had been under hegemony control for millennia were falling to human forces in a matter of hours. Admiral Harrison watched the tactical display with growing satisfaction. Red markers indicating hegemony installations winked out one by one, replaced by blue markers showing human control. The enemy's carefully planned offensive was dissolving into chaos as their command structure collapsed, and their industrial capacity was systematically destroyed. Signal from Admiral Chun aboard the Retribution, "Sir," reported Torres. "The 7th Fleet has successfully taken the Proxima Nexus. Enemy forces are in full retreat. Signal all fleet commanders," Harrison ordered. "Phase 2 is authorized. Begin the liberation operations." The second phase of Operation Starfall focused on the liberation of species that had been forced into the hegemony against their will. For centuries, smaller civilizations had been absorbed into the hegemony's empire through conquest or coercion, their resources and populations exploited to fuel the war machine. Human liberation fleets arrived at these systems not as conquerors, but as liberators, offering the subjugated species a choice: join the growing coalition against the hegemony or remain neutral under human protection. The response was overwhelming. Species that had suffered under hegemony rule for generations eagerly joined the human cause, bringing with them knowledge of hegemony weaknesses and strategic intelligence that proved invaluable. Within 48 hours of the offensive's beginning, the galactic balance of power had shifted dramatically. The hegemony, which had seemed invincible just days before, was reeling from the coordinated assault on their core systems. Their massive offensive against human space had stalled as commanders were recalled to defend their homeworlds. But Admiral Harrison knew that this was only the beginning. The hegemony still had vast resources and millions of ships scattered across the galaxy. The war was far from over, but for the first time in 3 centuries, humanity was no longer fighting for survival. They were fighting to win. The throne room of Kethmar had once been the symbol of Dominus supremacy across the galaxy. Its crystal walls had witnessed the submission of 1,000 species, the signing of treaties that carved up star systems like pieces of fruit. Now those same walls lay in ruins, their ancient luminescence dimmed by the smoke of burning cities. Grand Admiral Threshold stood among the wreckage, his 4 arms hanging uselessly at his sides as he surveyed the devastation. The kinetic bombardment had targeted military installations with surgical precision, but the psychological impact was far greater than any physical damage. For the first time in recorded Domina history, an enemy had struck at their sacred homeworld. "The reports keep coming in, Your Supremacy," whispered his aide, a trembling Chronax whose chitinous armor was cracked from the blast waves. "The humans have taken 47 core systems in the past 72 hours. The foundry worlds of Grimlock Prime and Vega Secundus are completely offline. Our fleet coordination centers in the Spiral Arm have gone silent." Threshold's eyes blazed with fury. "How is this possible? Our intelligence reports indicated that humanity was on the verge of collapse. Their fleets were scattered, their colonies burned, their industrial capacity crippled." The aide shuffled nervously, clearly reluctant to deliver more bad news. "It appears, Your Supremacy, that the humans have been conducting extensive deception operations for the past decade. Many of the colonies we thought we had destroyed were actually evacuated beforehand, their populations relocated to hidden settlements. The fleets we believed we had eliminated were largely composed of unmanned decoy vessels." Threshold struck the aide with one of his massive hands, sending the smaller alien sprawling across the rubble-strewn floor. You mean to tell me that we have been fighting phantoms? That everything we thought we knew about human capabilities was a lie? The humans call it strategic deception, your supremacy. While we focused on destroying their apparent assets, they were secretly developing new technologies and building hidden fleets. The quantum jump drives they used in their assault represent a quantum leap beyond our own spacefold technology. The Grand Admiral turned toward the shattered remains of the great window that had once offered a panoramic view of Kethmar's capital city. In the distance, human ships were descending through the atmosphere, their blue and white hulls gleaming in the light of the system's twin suns. They moved with a confidence that spoke of absolute victory, their formation so perfect it might have been choreographed. What of our offensive fleets? Surely they can reach Earth before these human dogs consolidate their gains. The aide struggled to his feet, ichor flowing from a gash in his carapace. Our offensive has stalled, your supremacy. Without the command nexuses, fleet coordination has become impossible. Many of our ships are retreating to defend their home systems. Others have simply disappeared. Threshcole's rage was so intense that the air around him began to shimmer with heat. The Dominas were a proud species, descendants of ancient star gods who had ruled the galaxy when most other species were still crawling in primordial mud. To be defeated by these upstart humans was more than humiliating. It was incomprehensible. A new voice echoed through the ruined throne room, carried by the human ship's broadcast systems. It spoke in perfect Domina, the pronunciation flawless despite the alien vocal cords that produced it. Grand Admiral Threshcole of the First Domina Empire, this is Admiral Marcus Harrison of the United Human Space Command. Your homeworld is now under our protection. Your military installations have been neutralized, and your orbital defenses have been dismantled. I am prepared to discuss the terms of your surrender. Threshcole roared his defiance, the sound echoing off the broken crystal walls. Never. The Domina Empire will never bow to inferior creatures. We have ruled this galaxy for 20,000 years. And in those 20,000 years, Harrison's voice continued, calm and implacable, you have brought nothing but suffering to countless species. You have enslaved the peaceful Androthi, strip-mined the homeworld of the crystalline shapers, and systematically exterminated any species that dared to resist your expansion. Your reign of terror is over. The human admiral's words carried a weight that went beyond mere military victory. They spoke of judgment, of a reckoning that had been centuries in the making. Across the galaxy, similar scenes were playing out on dozens of worlds as human forces delivered ultimatums to the hegemony's leadership. On the Kronax Foundry world of Grimlock Prime, Warlord Kethrak watched helplessly as his massive industrial complexes burned. The humans had targeted the production facilities with devastating precision, using a combination of kinetic bombardment and what appeared to be some form of exotic matter weapon that simply erased matter at the molecular level. How could we have underestimated them so completely? He growled to his subordinates, his mandibles clicking with agitation. We outnumber them 50-1. Our technology has been proven superior in countless battles. His chief engineer, a scarred veteran of the vegan campaigns, shook her massive head. Numbers mean nothing if they cannot be brought to bear effectively, Warlord. The humans have turned our own tactics against us. They studied our strategies for centuries, identified our weaknesses, and exploited them with ruthless efficiency. But their losses, Kethrak protested. We have killed billions of them over the past 3 centuries. How do they have the resources for such an offensive? The engineer's response sent chills through the assembled Kronax commanders. Because they never stopped growing, never stopped preparing. While we celebrated our victories and assumed we had broken their spirit, they were building hidden colonies, developing new weapons, training new fleets. Every human we killed made the survivors more determined, more dangerous. Similar conversations were taking place across the hegemony's command structure. The Zephyrian Collective, whose biological supercomputers had coordinated hegemony military operations for millennia, found themselves completely cut off from their fleet elements. The viral weapons used by the humans had not simply destroyed their command nexuses. They had infected the organic networks with a form of digital cancer that was spreading throughout their bioneural infrastructure. Elder Collective node Zeph THYSS floated in her nutrient tank, her tentacle-like appendages twitching with distress as she watched her life's work crumble before her eyes. The quantum encrypted communication networks she had spent centuries developing were not just compromised, they had been turned against the hegemony itself. The humans have somehow reverse-engineered our bioneural architecture, she reported to the emergency council session. They understand our systems better than we do ourselves. The virus they introduced is not random destruction. It is surgical, targeted, designed to maximize chaos while preserving certain functions. Council Node Vorthalen's bioluminescent patches flared with alarm. What functions are they preserving? Intelligence databases, prisoner records, slave registration systems. They are not simply destroying our infrastructure. They are liberating every species we have subjugated over the past millennium. The implications were staggering. The hegemony's power had always rested on their ability to exploit the resources and populations of conquered worlds. If the humans were systematically liberating those subjugated species and turning them against their former masters, the mathematical certainty of hegemony victory would rapidly become mathematical certainty of defeat. On distant Earth, President Maria Santos stood in the Situation Room deep beneath Geneva, watching the tactical displays with a mixture of satisfaction and sorrow. The offensive was succeeding beyond all projections, but the cost in human lives was still mounting. Every red marker that appeared on the display represented a ship full of young men and women who would never see their homeworld again. Casualty reports, Admiral Kim, she asked the Chief of Naval Operations. Admiral Kim Young-min consulted his tablet with practiced efficiency. Current losses stand at 4,732 confirmed dead, another 8,000 wounded. Considering the scope of the operation, casualties are remarkably light. President Santos nodded grimly. After centuries of devastating losses, 4,000 dead in an operation of this magnitude represented an almost miraculous success. But she could not forget that each number represented a family that would never be whole again, dreams that would never be fulfilled. And the enemy casualties. Conservative estimates put hegemony military losses at over 2 million dead and 12 million wounded. Their industrial capacity has been reduced by approximately 60%. More importantly, we have liberated over 200 subjugated species, adding their resources and knowledge to our coalition. The president turned to address the assembled military and civilian leadership. The hegemony believed that we were a young species that could be bullied into submission through superior force. They never understood that humanity's greatest strength has never been our technology or our numbers. It has been our ability to adapt, to learn, to turn our enemies' weapons against them. She gestured toward the tactical display, where blue markers now dominated regions that had been red just days before. For 3 centuries, we fought defensively because we believed that civilization required us to show restraint, to limit ourselves to proportional responses. The hegemony mistook that restraint for weakness. Her voice hardened, taking on the steel that had carried humanity through its darkest hours. They wanted to see what humanity was truly capable of when pushed to the brink of extinction. Now they know. We are not the peaceful farmers they thought they could intimidate. We are the descendants of creatures that hunted mammoths with pointed sticks, that crossed oceans in wooden boats, that reached for the stars when our own world was not enough. The room fell silent as the weight of her words sank in. The peace talks had been humanity's final attempt to resolve the conflict through diplomacy. Their collapse had not just marked the failure of negotiations. It had marked the moment when humanity stopped trying to be the galaxy's conscience and started trying to be its salvation. Signal Admiral Harrison, President Santos commanded. Inform him that Phase 3 is authorized. It is time to end this war once and for all. Phase 3 of Operation Starfall would be remembered by galactic historians as the moment when the old order finally died. As human fleets consolidated their gains and began the systematic liberation of every world under hegemony control, it became clear that this was not simply a military campaign. It was a revolution that would reshape the very fabric of galactic civilization.